Host.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee, attorney. Thank you for joining us today. Well, thank you for our listeners and our call-in audience for a live call-in show. And I have my superstar panel, Vanita Banks, a master's in tax, cyber security expert, crack research analyst, which is always happy to have her insight, and also the famous Milton, who led the revolution in police misconduct with Rodney King. So we have some exciting topics to discuss today. There's so many things that are occurring in the news. Let's get right at it. The big issue, of course, is the indictment, a second time, of a President 45th, Donald J. Trump. And start off, I thought that the former president had engaged in things that was questionable, but I noticed that, Counselor, the most damning evidence against the former president is being supplied by his lawyers to the Justice Department. What do you think about that, counselors? Hey, Milton, you're on mute.
I said that goes against that was the first conversation I had in law school about the confidentiality between the client and the attorney. And what was told to the lawyer was secret. Go to your grave with it. And then I learned later there are one or two exceptions to it. So we're in a new day, Nate. And don't know what's going to happen with the lawyers for violating the code. Maybe they got the release to do that from the bar. I remember that happening in the Mike Tyson case. I did some work on that afterwards. And the lawyer for Desiree and her family went to the bar from this in the state where he was from and said his clients were lying. And he got permission from the state bar to disclose that to the defense and the court. It's just that the judge did not appreciate it, but there are exceptions to these rules. So I don't know if they've got an excuse or permission to do that or not. But you know, there's a game called Catch the Greased Pig that some of the country boys play, I understand. And you got to catch this greased pig. I don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know. I bet you he gets away.
Attorney Banks?
In addition to the information provided by his own attorneys, I think equally as incriminating is former President Trump's own words. In his own in recordings, he's on record as acknowledging that he knew these records were classified and top secret. You know, another classic fundamental rule is on display here, Attorney Lee and Grimes, and that is attorneys counsel their clients not to talk about a case, right? And so former President Trump is talking about the case, making admissions. Much of the evidence in the case, from my perspective, is going to be based on Trump's own admissions.
AM 1310 The Light presents Legally Speaking. Here is today's host.
We have some malfunction, obviously, with our radio station, but keep going, Counselor. Go ahead.
I had completed my point.
Well, my problem is this: the evidence that was most damning. They're talking about the recording by the book company and places like that. The problem is they wouldn't know about that until their lawyer read them out and said, well, he met with this person, he met with that person. And so it gives them a roadmap as to what evidence they need to subpoena to secure. And that's what I was concerned about. And for over a couple of centuries, what's been sacrosanct, attorney-client privilege, that is, that we take to our grave secrets and confidence of a crime. But then the exception has always been prior criminal act or prior misconduct is protected by the attorney-client privilege.
Yep.
Future acts aren't. So if a client tells you, I'm going to go out and kill this SOB, then it's our duty to, as a public servant, to try to prevent the death of an innocent person. On the other hand, if he said, I've killed the SOB, then our goal is that we must not disclose the client's confidence or secrets, and we must carry that to our graves. And so, and that's what my concern is. But the case is really bizarre in the sense that you had Judge Elaine Cannon, who was appointed by Trump, controversial appointment, like many of the judges that came through in his administration. They went away from the ABA standards to appoint judges. You know, in the past, up for a century, we had ABA approval and investigation. And when Donald Trump took office, he made appointment of federal judges their top priority. And so the judges they would appoint did not go through the rigorous backgrounds of the ABA and the Bars Association in the past. And it was a strange departure from what was normal. And so the net result is that we've seen some really strange ruling on different cases. You know, we see that certain people file cases in South Texas, for example. They have one judge that whatever they file, he seemed to grant, and he got bench slapped, I saw yesterday, by the Supreme Court because they determined that he didn't have jurisdiction to make this ruling, the judge out of Texas. So the point is that you got Judge Elaine Cannon on the Trump case who started this investigation of the investigation, and I didn't understand why she didn't recuse herself from the case. So Milton, you think that he may be acquitted because of that?
I didn't say acquitted, sir, and I didn't say he would be found. You know, there's a difference in guilt and not guilty and innocence. Nobody's saying he'll be found innocent, but I'm saying he's a greased pig and he's gotten away before. And I don't know all the schemes and plans these people have, these lawyers have with Trump. What are you going to do if you do convict him? Where are you going to imprison him? Where are you going to house him with his Secret Service agents protecting him? What you going to do with him? I just don't know the answers to these questions that I have with this prosecution of the former president. We all know he did wrong things, criminal things, but he's been bragging about it. He's been presenting it. He's been open with it for the last 8-10 years.
Well, the most damning thing I thought was the attempt to overthrow the federal government. I thought that when the president of the United States encouraged this riotous crowd to kill the vice president, I just thought that that was a bridge too far, that there should have been swift accountability. In American system of justice, and accountability is an important component. So when the president advocated in a situation to incite a mob to kill the vice president, I thought that as a point of beginning, that's where they should have started. With all this crazy stuff, I thought that was the most damning aspect of the presidency, the attempt to overthrow the federal government by preventing the peaceful transfer of power. We've not seen that in American history, I think once before, but never at a large scale, where they actually attacked the Congress and they ran roughshod. I noticed that there's been hundreds of people convicted and pled guilty and things like that. But the point is, the leader of this insurrection has never been charged yet. And that's what I thought was the most damning thing about it. You know, and all the legal issues that came across, the attempt to overthrow the federal government, I thought was the most critical aspect of this whole process.
Have they charged him with that yet, Nate?
No,
Oh.
And as you said, have not charged him with that yet. And back to the 37 count indictment, I encourage everybody to read the 49-page indictment. The facts are methodically laid out. Importantly, he's not being charged with respect to any documents that he returned, only the documents, many of which you see in the photos. You got stacks of documents in a bathroom, for example, where allegedly people may have had unfettered, access to the various locations within Mar-a-Lago where these documents were housed. But former President Trump has made so many unforced, errors where in rallies and other public forums, he has stated that he could do whatever he wanted to do with these documents. I'm the president and I do whatever I want. He's relying on the Presidential Records Act, which he's interpreting inaccurately. Importantly, he's being charged with obstruction and violations of the Espionage Act, and really creating huge breaches, in our national security.
As you talk, I think a little about playing devil's advocate and reversing roles. Where can my client get a fair trial? He has been trialed thoroughly through the media. He has been accused of everything. I doubt if we can find 12 individuals, Your Honor, who can give him a fair trial, who have not already prejudged him. It's going to take about 2 or 3 years to pick a jury. So what are we going to do with this thing? You'd have to go past the moon to get a group of intelligent individuals who have not heard about some or all of these things now.
well, I can give you some idea. Here's how the process works when you have high profile cases like this. The court can send out an unlimited number of jury questionnaires, right? So we've had these high profile cases, and what can occur is that just say that you have, you can pick any number. They can send out 1,000 of these jury questionnaires, and they're pretty detailed. And when I've been involved, they allow the lawyers to have input into the type of question that could be submitted to these potential jurors, right? Say you send out 1,000 of these questionnaires, and the first question you could ask them, who won the 2020 presidential election? Who do you think actually won and why? And have people explain that. So you have a series of questions like that, maybe about 50 questions, right? And I kept some of these from my trials that I use in seminars. And then you get these questions in, and then you have the staff weed through those questions, and you take the 1,000, you narrow it down to maybe 200 or less, whatever, because there's going to be a lot of folks that disqualify themselves. Now you got to remember also, in today's society, and Attorney Bank can vouch for this, everything about us is on the internet now. So the staff then, or the lawyers, depending on how the court does this, you could like go through and do a background check on all the potential jurors to find out whether or not they have any posted bias. Right now, social media, people don't rat themselves out like John Morant. I mean, they post everything negative about themselves on the social media. So you go through the social media posts and things like that. And then you get down to about less than 100 jurors. Then, so when you start the voir dire process, you could do it in a group where you separate them, and then you get down to, jury about 40 or 50, and then you do your strikes and preempt. So even though it seemed like a daunting process, but the way they do that, it's not so complicated, I think. I think you could get a jury, but the problem that I see is that you got 30% of the people in America, based on some of the polls I've seen, that says that a person who lost the election by 7.1 million votes actually won. And because of this dichotomy and thought process, I just think that you're right, Milton. It's going to be a daunting task to get some objective jurors.
It is.
Hopefully, at some point, this matter might be resolved through potentially a plea deal. I know there had been some earlier discussions. And Attorney Lee, I was thinking about your last point, and that was in response to Milton's point that those individuals that voted for Mr. Trump and believe that the election was stolen, many of them across the country will be part of that jury pool as well.
Yep.
To address any argument that he, quote, can't get a jury. Well, I mean, first of all, what would be a jury of Trump's peers? It's a fundamental question. But in terms of bias and him not being able to get a fair trial, I would raise Nathaniel's point relative to those who really agree with him that the election was stolen, and I'm sure might comprise some of the jury pool.
Well, Milton and Attorney Banks, here's what am I concerned about this particular client. He goes on TV, and every crime that he's done, he basically confesses on live TV. So I was watching this interview with Fox, and I'm thinking, every lawyer who ever represented a client, we tell our client, don't discuss this with anyone. And why we're trying to do that, we're trying to protect you from saying something stupid that would lead to incriminating evidence against you. Well, this person is a walking neon sign. Mm-hmm. So everything he does wrong, he goes on TV and articulate it in a manner that shows that he's committing crimes. And I was watching him saying, well, I alone have the ability to declassify this. And I could just declassify it by just thinking about it.
Well, it would be fair to say that you formed an opinion about my client. And it would be fair to say, wouldn't you agree, that that opinion is that he's probably guilty of the things that he's charged with. And so with that, you are sitting on this jury panel or box with your mind made up. And in honesty, there's no way you could be fair to this man. I mean, you could be better in another case, but this case, where you've seen all of this publicity and all of these pundits talking about the guilt of my client, you have a doubt, I know.
Well, here's the way you respond. Well, I've seen the other side. They say he's completely innocent and that the news media just made it up. So I can keep an objective mind. I can listen to the judge's instruction, and I can be objective about this. I have no bias either way.
If you were him, would you feel comfortable with the person with their state of mind said on the jury that they hadn't predetermined the guilt?
The response would be absolutely. I want somebody like myself on the jury. I want somebody like myself that's objective and fair to both sides. So when you say that,
do you lie before you eat breakfast or after you eat breakfast to your wife?
Object. Improper question.
So the point I'm making is that this dialogue that we're having now is important because you, the listening audience, when you're on the jury panel, when in order to be disqualified, the judge would ask you, can you be objective and fair to both sides? If the answer is no, then they're going to strike you for cause. If you say yeah, then they have to use a preemptive. They can still get you off the jury, but they have to use one a preemptive challenge, and they may only get them 10 or 12. And so, a lot of times you get stay on jury's duty. Okay,
you might disagree with me, guys, and this may sound racist, but I tend to believe throughout my 49 years of practicing law that African-American people tend to be the most honest of prospective jurors as to their belief in law enforcement, their disagreement and their resentment of law enforcement and not being able to believe what cops say. Other people from other ethnic groups appear to be able to be neutral about things that you know that they are not neutral about. I just want to put that out there. We tend to admit that we don't believe cops, where other people will say they'll be fair and impartial, and we know that they tell them a lie.
Okay, Council, let's just take one caller. Imhotep, you got to come in about the Trump indictment today, sir.
Yes, I do. How you doing, Brother Nate?
Doing great.
All right, good. Attorney Grimes, Attorney Banks. A couple quick points here. One, I think Attorney Grimes, the jury issue has always been an issue, especially dealing with black people. Michelle Alexander highlights it thoroughly in the new Jim Crow. You know, black people have had to deal with all white juries. I mean, pre-Norris versus Powell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so, you know, when do we ever get a fair jury? When do we ever get a jury of our peers? It's very rare. You had a judge in Kentucky, a black judge, came out maybe a few years back and said no black person should ever have an all-white jury. They got mad at him and reprimanded him. Good brother.
They did.
Yes. Thank you. I'm glad some people keep up. I know you guys do. And he said that out loud.
I filed that case because he got reprimanded. I think he got suspended even, but
30 days. He got reprimanded 30 days.
I raised that issue in a death penalty case, and the judge agreed with me, and so did the prosecution. And we struck that jury and brought in another jury, and they had 6 blacks in that panel.
Good. And
fight that situation.
And I think Nate's constant push of making sure that we're registered to vote, taking a part of the jury pool process, is maybe one part of it, but we do know that prosecutors, we know what happened with the Ahmaud Arbery case, and that prosecutor, we know that they're in Mississippi with some cases I've read. The one guy that the Supreme Court let off, Nate, you followed that, you was involved with that case, that they just kept striking black jurors off the jury down in Mississippi. I forgot the gentleman's name, but he got out. He had not done the murders, but the prosecutor kept just striking jurors away. So it's a problem. But I wanted to ask you all, Attorney Banks, definitely I want your opinion on this, being in the Chicago area. We've got a tenor around here, especially here in Indianapolis on black radio here, not you all personally, but on black radio, that, and mostly from older blacks, that it just sounds like they want the 94 crime bill back. We know from every piece of research that we've done, Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, you name it, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, whatever, that we cannot lock our way out of this problem. We know from research, especially in New Jim Crow's book, that when you have these hard, tough initiatives, a lot of innocent or low-level people get caught up in it, mainly black people. How do we get our people to quit biting this apple, quit falling for that talk? Because Trump came out this week and said he wanted death penalty for drug dealers. He didn't say that about rapists, who I think, when I did counseling in the prison, the worst person that got respect in the prison was the rapist or the child molester. He didn't call for them. Why? Because the research showed that they're mostly white males. He didn't call for death penalty for Boy Scouts and the Catholic priests that did what they did. What can we do to stop our people from not looking at the whole, holistic? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Looking at the whole, when they keep biting this tough crime stuff, and it's going to just lock up a bunch of low-level or innocent black people. I can't get that through for nothing, and it just frustrates me. Thanks for taking my call.
Attorney Banks,
I understand the caller's frustration, and I agree wholeheartedly with him. And we have to look at these systemic, long-time issues holistically. And here in the city of Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson, he has not even yet served his first 100 days, but he comes into office, as you know, as other mayors of big cities across our nation, with a whole host of issues, including crime, homelessness, economics, etc. However, the way he's addressing it, he's attempting to address these issues holistically, by not embracing the past failed policies that our caller has just described, but starting out with his first executive order included elevating youth employment and establishing a new deputy mayors for immigration and refugee rights, community safety, and labor relations. And he's focused on eradicating the root causes of crime and also coordinating those efforts to invest in young people. And he has laid out a plan for public safety, but these are systemic issues and challenges that are not going to be addressed or solved quickly. But from my perspective, he has the right approach to addressing these issues holistically.
Well, thank you. Okay, Pierre Pullins, you have a question or comments for us today, sir?
I'd like to respond to his question.
Hello. Go ahead.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead, Milton.
Go ahead.
You know, I hear the brother loud, and it's not always evident in every case, but the prisons are still, like out here in California, for every 100,000 how do I put this? The percentage of African Americans in prison far outnumber the percentage of whites in prison. You got, for every 100,000, you have maybe 100 white men in prison. For every 100,000 blacks, you got 1,700 in prison. So we know there's a disparity somewhere in here. The picture is not right. Prosecutors throughout the country, in like Colorado, have recognized that blacks are charged differently than whites for the same act. Blacks are sentenced differently than whites for the same act. So the prosecutors in Colorado, I think it's 8 different counties, are comparing those statistics, and the evidence is clearly there that blacks get more severe treatment in the criminal justice system than white defendants. Here in California, there's an act 2 years old called the Racial Justice Act, which allows you to request discovery from the DA's office as to their sentencing of defendants for like crimes, robbery, rape, whatever. What are the statistics for sentencing of white defendants compared to black defendants, compared to Hispanic defendants? And now the DA's office fought me tooth and nail on that request for a case that I had that was an ugly factual case dealing with a sexual offense by my client. But I wanted the statistics that they keep of white defendants that are sentenced for the same thing, because the information that we gathered was that white defendants, teachers, etc., police officers, and others were sentenced much lighter for the same or similar offense than a black defendant. You follow me? So we didn't get that information, but we were able to use the request to negotiate the case of the client. But the main thing is that there are statistics out there that support what we are saying at that end of the scale, that black defendants are sentenced harsher than white defendants. I'm doing a case out in Utah dealing with the school district where the Department of Justice investigated the district about racism. The Davis County School District gave their report in 2021, October the 15th. And it concluded that black students are disciplined harsher than white students for the same little schoolyard violation from elementary school up through high school. The statistics show that for an incident the little white boy involved in a fight is taken to the principal's office and counseled. The same incident, a little black boy in the fight is suspended from school. You follow me? So it goes not just from the criminal justice system, it goes to the educational system. They found that, yes, it's true that the education, the Davis County School Board approved of not allowing Black students to have social groups, but the white students and the Hispanic students can have social groups. The Department of Justice came out with the report saying over the 3 years investigated, the N-word had been used over 200 times and nothing was done about it. My point is that not only the criminal justice system, but the education system, because this is one that the Department of Justice investigated and found the evidence that there's discrimination within the system, even the school system. So I don't know that, other than to take on lawsuits that shows this, but it doesn't stop it from happening still. That's mine.
That was my concern as well. Those statistics are not a surprise to many of us with respect to the education system as well as the criminal justice system. The statistics are clear and ever mounting.
Here.
We just saw the report from the DOJ with respect to the Minneapolis Police Department and their findings, their 7 findings that the department engages in a pattern and practice of conduct that deprives citizens of their First and Fourth Amendment rights. No surprise to any of us regarding these findings, that specific finding that stated that the racial discrimination and excessive force is what resulted in the death or made possible the death of George Floyd. Again, no surprise to many of us. You mentioned as well, Milton, that when potential Black jurors are interviewed, they speak to these issues and they speak to them honestly and candidly. And so my question becomes, we have all these statistics. We understand that this is happening. What are the solutions?
I don't know, Vanita. I swear I don't know,
Well, here's what the solutions are, because I've been working on this my whole professional career. The number one issue that you have to deal with, the person that controls the courtroom, to control the sentence, is the judge. So we have to have laser focus on state, local, and federal judges. More than anything else in our justice system, they play the most important role of any of the actors or participant. A judge can make a wrongdoing right by ruling from the bench. If a case is garbage, they could throw it out. They could make special arrangement for jurors. So the process is controlled by judicial officials, and that's where we have to focus our attention on going forward as a point of beginning. The second, of course, is the prosecutors, who bring the cases. If you have corrupt police enforcement of laws and regulation, the prosecutor will have firsthand knowledge. And I had different prosecutors that I've talked to over my professional career that basically told me that they thought things were racially motivated. So in any event, let's take one quick call and then we get back to this. A caller, Pierre Pullen, you have a question or comment for us today, sir?
Yes, sir. I'll be real quick and I'll be real brief. I need Milton and Vanita, I need a favor from you guys. I need you guys to keep an eye on me because, Vanita, I filed my reply brief in the election fraud case that I had here in Indianapolis at the 7th Circuit. They have it. They've had it for about a week. They may have even ruled on it. I haven't gotten it in the mail. There's been a complete media blackout here in Indianapolis on that court case, election fraud case. And I'm sorry, Nate doesn't like me talking about it, so I'm going to get off of his program. I don't like to be rude or anything, but I believe the judge was political. I believe I did not get a fair shake, and I said as much respectfully in my reply brief. But I just wanted you two attorneys to keep an eye on these, make sure I'm still calling into the show and everything. And just wanted, it's like an election fraud case in Los Angeles or Chicago getting buried by the LA Times or the Chicago Tribune. And I don't want to get buried along with it. So just wanted to put that to you too. Keep an eye on me, and thank you.
Well,
for
Pierre,
taking
one
my
quick
call.
question. Are you claiming that there was election fraud here in Indianapolis?
Yes. Oh, Nate, you know about that case. You know about that case, absolutely. And it worked its way through the federal courts here in Indianapolis. And to be honest with you, I don't think I got a fair shake out of Judge Sweeney and Magistrate Dinsmore and the United States Attorney, state police, everybody. Nobody would investigate that case. And the Indianapolis Star, the Indiana Lawyer, the Indianapolis Recorder, who I believe had a hand in that, nobody would report just the basic allegations to the public. That's a public interest suit that was essentially buried by the Indianapolis media. And it's extraordinary, especially when all of this other stuff with Donald Trump was going on with his. He didn't have evidence. I have evidence. President didn't have any evidence in his case, but I had evidence, but nobody wanted to look at it. You see, so I'm gonna get off the radio because I know other folk want to call in, but I just wanted to tell Milton and Vanita that, and just to keep an eye on me. And the case is Pierre Pullins versus Mila Eldridge, our former clerk of the courts here in Marion County. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
I recently read a book about Indianapolis and Indiana, Pierre, about a guy named D.C. Stevenson and how he revitalized the Ku Klux Klan in your lovely state back in the 20s. And he could see the White House. He damn near touched it before he screwed up and got involved in the death of this woman. But the Klan took over your state. My point, though, is that I want to make is that, Nate, yeah, the judges are important in the administration of justice in our society, but judges are influenced by popular opinion. Judges are influenced by the fear of losing their jobs. The judges are influenced by what they think the higher ups want of them. I represented a federal judge one time who said he was no different than any other judge. He has to look at cases and think about how the public opinion will be about what he rules, Nate. I don't know if we need term limit for judges to keep them honest and less influenced by politics, or term limits to keep them less fearful, especially for state judges, of what they decide. But just the saying judges are going to keep the order and do and guarantee what we do is fair in the justice system, I don't think that works. There was a judge in Virginia a couple of years ago who said he was not going to try another black man in his courtroom as long as these pictures of all these white races are on the wall, because it has a subliminal effect on jurors. So it's a more complicated matter than that. Judges, that's like the rest of us. They're concerned about their jobs and feeding their family. So sometimes they don't protect our rights as well as they should because of that fear.
To that last point, Milton, to that last point, we have a law firm here in town, Barnes and Thornburg. These two judges that I've mentioned used to work at Barnes and Thornburg. Barnes and Thornburg represents the Indianapolis Star. So this I'm just telling you, the way our law firm is connected to the federal courts, which is connected to the papers, I'm talking, man, this is state-controlled media. It is influenced to the hilt. Think about the most powerful law firm in California and how they operate with respect to the state legislature there in LA and San Francisco, and you understand what I'm talking about. Same thing with Springfield and Chicago, top law firms there. They're all connected and they all know each other. They trade seats and everything, and that's what we're dealing with. Thank you for taking my call.
And I hate to say this about him because everybody knows it, but it's the truth. Clarence Thomas should not be sitting on the bench, but he's lifetime insured. I mean, we got a problem with our judicial system.
Most of us, to that point, Attorney Grimes, will never have a case before the U.S. Supreme Court. And as Attorney Lee stated, that's why the focus should be on state and local judges. And that's why voting matters. That's why it's important to know who the judicial candidates are in your locale. This is why diversity matters on the bench. To Nathaniel's point, it enhances judicial thinking and perspective, and it permits the interaction and discussion of judicial colleagues that have different backgrounds and life experiences and viewpoints.
But Vanita, I disagree with you in that respect, that most of us won't have a case before the Supreme Court. You're right on that point, but the country that we're part of have cases before that Supreme Court, voting right cases and different other discriminatory cases. Clarence Thomas vote on. So we indirectly do have cases before the Supreme Court.
That's an excellent point, Attorney Grimes. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Well, that was really some really powerful discussion of the issue. I'm going to move forward to the next issue.
We
First,
just saw
Milton,
that 8-1 decision in the Alabama redistricting case that I was so pleasantly surprised. And to your point, Milton, Clarence Thomas was the sole dissenter in that case and ruled that having, in his dissent, he stated, and this is the Alabama redistricting case, 8-1 decision. Do I have that right?
Mm-hmm.
8-1 decision. Okay, because there was another one that was 5-4. Okay, but 8-1 decision wherein Clarence Thomas in his dissent stated that there's nothing in the Constitution that requires that there be proportionate representation based on race.
Maybe his landlord told him to let me shut up.
Yeah, it was actually that case was ended up being a 5-4 in the main component parts of it.
That's okay.
It had to do with the lower court had found that it was a violation of the Voter Rights Act, and what they were doing in Alabama, they withdrew the maps to dilute the Black vote and participation to eliminate Black congressional candidates. And so it was a rare departure that everybody thought. Now we have a litany of cases coming before the Supreme Court, and the most pressing one, to echo what Attorney Grimes said earlier, is the case involving affirmative action. And it's going to be devastating for a lot of younger African Americans who could come into our system to attend these prestigious colleges and universities. This idea of being able to have access to these elite schools is a rarity. I attended University of Georgia Law School, and they did not allow Blacks to attend the law school until 1973. And so affirmative action was always present, but it was for white influential persons got to go to law school based on who they knew. And then it wasn't until, the mid-70s before they started admitting Blacks to a lot of these schools. And now that short period in time of less than, 50 years of this being in place, now they want to take that away, the rights to have equal access, to make sure that we properly consider other factors. Admission into these schools based on tests is not sacrosanct. In other words, it doesn't really tell you whether or not the person is going to be successful as a lawyer, doctor, or engineer, or otherwise. And a lot of people feel that these tests that admit people are culturally biased. And I can give you a lot of examples of tests that are manipulated, like here in Indianapolis is probably the most relevant example. In our police department, everyone, they used to design tests to promote police officers here based on who was in the pool of testees, right? So, in other words, if they had some white officers who were field trained officers and none of the black officers had that, then they may give extra points for that. Well, the next class, it may be for another factor, but they looked at who was in the pool, and this is what I obtained in depositions. And so the point I'm making is that this idea of equal justice is still a dream, but not fully fulfilled yet. We still have struggles. And so it was a surprise to see that the Supreme Court did uphold the lower court ruling that said that these maps they drew in Alabama were unconstitutional. It was good to see that. Now,
it was great to see. Go ahead.
Yeah,
It
so
was
I'm
great
not
to
sure
see.
they're gonna do in these other cases though.
Exactly. Again, I was pleasantly surprised. And just to correct the record, a 5-4 ruling by the Supreme Court with the opinion written by Justice Roberts, and the majority opinion found and stated that race can and should be considered with respect to voting, and that the Alabama redistricting process undermined Alabama Black voters' voting power. And so it's just critical to understand that voting matters. And then we look at these gerrymandering, redistricting, approaches, that those systemic actions undermine our democracy. And that now the seats in Alabama will go from only one seat to 7 seats that may be filled by candidates of color.
And that would be a fair outcome to one of the pinnacles of democracy is that voters are supposed to select our representative, and that's been sacrosanct for what democracy is about, American exceptionalism. But legislators are trying to let the legislators decide who wins and not the voters. And that's a shameful and radical departure of what democracy is all about. And so I applaud that effort and for that narrow Supreme Court victory. But I'm holding my breath, Counselor, because there's some watershed cases that are still pending, and this court have went off the rail. And very briefly, last year, Attorney Banks, I remember we were talking last year this time about the overturning Roe versus Wade. We haven't discussed that, but that's the 1-year anniversary of the terrible decision that was the departure of what the 73 Roe versus Wade decision had done. And I think that we've seen a lot of adverse legislation that affect women's rights and things like that. But you remember we had that discussion last year this time, Counselor?
Absolutely. And this is the 1-year anniversary of the reversal of the long time precedent and 50-year precedent of Roe versus Wade. And currently, more than 25 million women live in states that have restricted access to reproductive health and abortion since the Dobbs decision. Illinois is one of those states among at least 20 states that protect a woman's right to make choices regarding her own body. But since last year, doctors and health professionals, they fear legal consequences of being criminally, prosecuted as a result of caring for female patients. We've seen legal attacks on FDA approved medication used to terminate abortions in at least 50% of cases in this nation. That medication is safer than aspirin and Viagra. We've also seen laws enacted in 25 states banning or restricting abortion.
I'm concerned about this law for a whole litany of other reasons. The 21st Amendment was passed about a century ago that allowed women the right to vote. Now, the rights of women have exceeded the rights of minority. And now my concern is that once they go after women's rights, who's in line next? We have not had the best history of rights for African Americans in our country. If you think about the Brown versus Board and those line of cases and how long it took to implement that. But what concerns me is that we've seen state by state in these Republican-controlled states or enacting laws that are so restrictive. And a lot of these laws don't make sense to me. Like in Indiana, we rolled back the rights of women in terms of abortion. But the problem that is this is that now, if they determine that life begins at 15 weeks, do I get to sue for malpractice now for a 15-week-old fetus who we know can't survive? I've not seen any documented cases of 15-week fetus surviving outside the mother's womb. I did the heparin cases where we had one baby that was like 23 weeks that lived, but ordinarily you should be in the third trimester. And so the point I'm making is that I'm concerned about the after effect of these laws. They've been now enacting these laws in other states, and where do we go? Do we enact laws that are so restrictive that we eliminate fundamental rights of women in our country? I don't know where it's going to stop, and that's what I'm concerned about.
Well, Clarence Thomas told us what his thinking is. In his dissent in the Roe case, he stated that the same legal analysis in the Roe case should be used to in the consideration of the rights of same-sex marriages. He didn't mention his own interracial marriage, of course, and then also, with respect to, the rights to contraceptives. And so, so he was very clear in his dissent that he's coming after all rights.
Yeah,
That's terrible. And I really look forward. I know Milton has some really good comments about Clarence Thomas. And but Milton, that it resonates with you that they now have also Justice Alito in the same predicament?
Clarence just offends me because of his ethnicity, I guess. You follow me? I can expect that from, not expect, but it's different coming from the two of them. But yeah, they're in the same bag.
Attorney Lee, were you mentioning with respect to the gifts and vacations and other benefits?
They seem to
or ideology
agree with each other on their opinions most of the time. Rarely are they separate, but go ahead, Vanita.
Right. Were you referencing ideology as Milton just pointed out?
Well, my point is, my interaction with judges in my professional career is that I always like for judges to invite me to lunch. And you know why? Because I've never paid. They refuse to allow you to pay for the lunch. All the judges I know, whether state court, appellate, or federal, they buy your food because they do not want you to buy anything for them. Right. And I'm cool with that. I'm thinking, hey, Judge, no, Nathaniel, I got this. they refuse to take a free lunch. And so that's been my experience in my professional career. I've never had these judges actually allow me to buy their lunch.
Well,
Now,
the few times that I've gone to lunch with judges, and I can't say it's compared to your times, Nathaniel, and maybe because I'm looked at as a criminal lawyer more than civil, they let me pay for their lunch.
Well, my reaction to this is everybody should pay for their own lunch.
Vanita, I'm a guy
That's transparency.
I'm a guy that wants to pick up
kind
the
of
check.
Transparency that I'm thinking we need to instill in the process.
I pick up the check too much. I'm one of those kind of guys, but they never refuse. They never refuse.
Well, I don't want to trivialize this because what we're talking about with Milton, that was Clarence Thomas, wasn't just a lunch. A trip on a Gulfstream jet that he took. Those trips, if you run them privately, going to cost you between $80,000 to $120,000 per trip for what he was taking. And so he was doing that on a regular basis. And now we find out that this person who's providing the trip got friends with these cases coming before the Supreme Court.
No shit.
And so I agree with one of the senators. They were saying that they probably ought to conduct an investigation on this matter to determine whether or not there's any connection between these gifts and decisions of the Supreme Court. I think it's a fair inquiry because I like to see what comes of it.
He's not going to recuse himself from any of those cases, my brothers and sisters. He's not.
I agree with you.
That's sad.
Yeah, it is. That state of justice.
Hey, one final comment from each of you. Milton, quick point here. I've been following your city, LA. Your mayor has taken something remarkable. You had those thousands of homeless people, and she managed to put them in hotel.
Yeah.
I thought that was amazing. I think that your mayor is, we don't pay a lot of attention to homeless folks because they're not voting. So I really applaud the effort to try to make their lives better. I like to see that model indoctrinated and repeated in other cities. We have the same problem in our city. I like the idea of getting these people off the streets and
we got to match that though with some way of getting their attention and treatment for mental illness and health problems, because my personal example with the homeless woman was we got housing for her, etc., and her friends and just people booted her on out of that housing. Other homeless people just took it over, and repeatedly that happened on 2 occasions, and she ended up on the street and died on the street 2 years ago. So it's more than just putting the shelter over their head. It's another component that's missing, Nate, and that is we don't pay enough attention to the mental need, the medical need of the homeless still.
I agree. Any final comment, Attorney Banks?
I echo Milton's comments relative to the immigrant and homeless situation. I know here in Chicago that the mayor is looking at and making available schools that are no longer in use, buildings, school buildings and other buildings that can be used to house unhoused citizens. And I agree wholeheartedly that that's just the first step in addressing that challenge.
Oh, at the beginning of the show, I apologize. I saw that we got a lot of text messages on this. I forgot to give our call-in numbers. Write this number down, folks. I apologize. It's 833-653-3529. 833-653-3529. That's our call-in number. So write that down for our next show. And one final comment. Also, for all you folks that sent these texts and emails, thank you for those. And I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to address them all. But I want to give a special thanks to all the African-American women who've been showing up for jury duty. You become the pillar to our democracy in terms of the vote, in particular jury's duty. And lately, I've had the very best jurors ever, but they've been headed up by African-American women. Thank you very much for showing up, and thank you for listening and paying attention to the evidence. It's been just a wonderful experience to make sure that we're part of the democratic process. I'd like to thank everyone for calling in. I'm sorry that we could not get to all our folks that sent us text and email, and we'll try to get you in on the next show. Thank you, everybody, and have a blessed day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.